Thank you so much. Forgive me for speaking in English, but my French is truly terrible. It is an honor and a pleasure to be with you here tonight, and I'd like to speak with you about technology and creativity and ultimately humanity. But if you will indulge me, I'd like to begin by telling you how I became a classical musician. I grew up in a very small farming town on the west coast of the United States. I wore cowboy boots and the cowboy hat. And when I was 13 years old, I discovered the music of Depeche Mode and Duran Duran. And I had hair like this, and I played synthesizers and drum machines, and I thought this is what I would do with my life, was be a rock star. And when I turned 18, I went to university, and because a friend came to me and said, "You have to join the choir. There are all of these cute girls in the soprano section, and at the end of the year, we get to take a trip to Mexico. All expenses paid." And so I thought for tequila and for girls, I could do nearly anything. And I joined the choir, and on the very first day of rehearsals, we came in, and if any of you have been in a choir, we started with rubbing each other's backs. We're doing this, and then this, and massaging our faces. And I've never been more embarrassed for mankind as I was in that moment. I couldn't believe that people came and did this kind of thing on their own, voluntarily. And the conductor said, "Let's open to the Kyrie." Now, I had been raised without religion, not as an atheist, but as an agnostic, and I didn't even know what a Kyrie was. And I'm sitting in the bass section, and I look over here, turn to it, and we start into the Kyrie from the Requiem Mass by Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. And if any of you have sung it before, you know that it begins with the basses. We begin, Kyrie ele, and then the altos, dum, 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 da, 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 dum. And suddenly I was hearing counterpoint around me, dissonance and harmony, something that I'd never experienced before. It was like a cosmic Swiss watch unfolding in front of me. And at first, I started trembling, and then I started giggling, and then finally I had tears in my eyes, and it was as if my entire life I had been seeing in black and white, and suddenly the world was in shocking technicolor. And I left that rehearsal completely transformed, what we'd say in America, a geek, a choir geek, the biggest choir geek. And I joined every choir I possibly could. And when I was 21 years old, in the third year of my 7-year undergraduate degree, I decided to try writing my very first piece of music. And I composed it as a gift to this conductor who had changed my life. And that piece was performed at a conference and then was published. And then I wrote another one, and that was published. And then soon I was commissioned. Someone actually gave me money to do this. And I wrote another piece, and that was published. And around about 25 years old, I started conducting orchestras and choirs. I went to the Juilliard School in New York to get my master's degree. And for the past 20 years, I've been making my living, my vocation, as a classical composer and conductor. I still can't believe it. And I get to travel all over the world working with classical musicians. One of the very strange things about being a composer is that you spend most of your time in a room alone by yourself, a blank page, and just trying to make sense of the nothingness, trying to find order in the chaos. And you work very hard on it. The piece goes out, you have the big premiere, you're wearing the tuxedo, and it's quite splashy and an event, and then that's it. The piece gets published, and it goes out into the world like one of your children. You don't know where it's going or who it might be touching. So 5 years ago, this video was uploaded to YouTube, a fan video made for me.
Hi, Mr. Eric Whitacre. My name is Britland Lucy, and this is a video that I'd like to make for you. Here's me singing Sleep. I'm a little nervous, just to let you know. If
I thought Britland was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen in my life. Here she was singing just the soprano part to this choral piece that I'd written. And she had taken and made this message like an electronic message in a bottle. sending it out into the world and hoping that it would find its way to me. And as I watched her video, I got tears in my eyes. And I don't cry all the time, by the way. These are the only 2 times I've ever cried in my life. I had this idea. If I could somehow get 50 singers, 50, to do exactly what Britlin was doing, if they were singing their part, soprano, alto, tenor, or bass, wherever they were in the world, as long as they were singing at the same speed and in the same key, if they uploaded all of their videos to YouTube and we started them at the same time, it would have to make a choir. It would have to make a virtual choir. So the first big problem was, how do I get all of them singing at the same speed? So I uploaded this video of me conducting a piece that I'd written called Lux Aurumque, which in Latin simply means light and gold. And you hear there's no sound because there's no choir yet. I can tell you this was a very strange day in the recording studio, me just recording this piece. And I uploaded this with sheet music that they could download, and suddenly singers from around the world started sending in their videos. This is Cheryl Ang from Singapore. This is Evangelina Etienne from the United States. This is Stephen Hansen from Sweden. And this is Jamal Walker from Texas. There's even a very small soprano solo at the beginning of it, and we held auditions. 60 different sopranos uploaded their video, hoping to be the one chosen. We chose Melody Myers from Tennessee. Easy. I don't know if you can see the top comment. It says, "You melt my face off." Truly. And so suddenly we had 185 videos from 12 different countries people had sent in. And this young man named Scott Haynes came forward and he said, "I would like to be the one to cut all of these together." And I was so glad that Scott found us. It was a massive amount of work. You can hear in some of the videos a hiss, a computer hiss, psh, underneath it. All of that needed to be cleaned out of the videos, scrubbed out. But even more, there were some videos where you could hear crickets or ambulances. Or in one video, you could hear someone's mother yelling in the background, "What are you doing in there?" All of that audio had to be cleaned up and mixed just right. And 4 years ago, we uploaded to YouTube this video. This is the virtual choir performing my composition, Lux Aurumque. And if you'll forgive me, I'll stop it there. It goes on for a few more minutes. And the video went viral. We had a million views almost overnight, and suddenly singers from around the world were writing to us saying, what is this? Virtual choir, we want to be a part of this. When can we do ours? So I decided for Virtual Choir 2 to do a different piece of mine called Sleep, uploaded the conductor track, the music, and we ended up with this. 2,058 singers from 58 different countries. And forgive me, I'll stop it there as well. The most amazing thing, this time we had singers as young as 6 years old, singers as old as 96 years old, as far north as Alaska, as far south as New Zealand. We had countries like Iraq, Iran, Syria, Egypt, Jordan, Israel, 7 countries from the African nation. Suddenly this thing had become a global phenomenon. 2 years ago, we launched Virtual Choir 3, another piece of mine called Water Night. (3,746 videos from 73 different countries. And I can tell you as a conductor, that is a great feeling to stand this big and have a wall of singers like this. I wish it were real. This time around, besides the enormity of singers, we had these incredible stories. There was a singer who was legally blind, who for the past 30 years had not been able to sing in a choir because he couldn't see the conductor. For the first time, he could get close enough to the screen to see my conductor track and to join. There was a woman whose mother was dying in hospice, and she held her hand off screen while she recorded her video. There's a young man from Cuba who desperately wanted to be part, but because of government restrictions on the size of the email he could send, he wasn't able to send his 24 meg video file. So he split it apart into 24 1 meg files, sent them all to us. We stitched them back together, and Cuba was represented. It was beautiful. And organically, this group calling themselves the VC Army, the Virtual Choir Army, came from the woodwork. We had nothing to do with it. It first started as a way to help people who needed technical help. And so people who had never used a computer before but wanted to be a part of it. But then it became about voice lessons and giving voice lessons over Skype and over Google Hangouts. And they organized themselves so that there was always someone on in every time zone on Earth, so that if anybody needed help, they would do so. This is the Sistine Chapel. In 1630, Gregorio Allegri wrote one of the most beautiful pieces of choral music ever, a miserere. And for 140 years, it was only performed in the Sistine Chapel in Easter week, performed once on Wednesday and again on Good Friday. By papal decree, it was not allowed to be performed anywhere else in the world, and pilgrims would flock from all over to hear this magnificent music. Here, listen for a moment. So beautiful. And it was only because a 14-year-old Mozart in 1771, who happened to be visiting Rome, went to the Wednesday service, heard it, went back to his hotel room and wrote the entire thing down from memory. Then went back on Friday just to make sure he'd gotten all the notes right, which he had. This is the only reason we have this piece. And it's interesting because it starts speaking to something that I find within the virtual choir, which is this: information wants to be free. It wants to be free. For me, as a musician and an artist, music really is information of a different kind. It's emotional information, but it will find any possible way to get out into the world. And we find this constantly with Mozart, and in the more modern world, say with Edward Snowden on the small level, and on the big, big level with the granddaddy of them all, Wikipedia. This is a real-time update showing Wikipedia being updated. Wikipedia has only 110 full-time paid employees. 110 full-time paid employees who oversee 30 million articles in 284 different languages. It's easily the largest library, the largest collection of human wisdom since the Library at Alexandria. There are 127,000 part or full-time volunteers that make Wikipedia happen. It's a phenomenon unlike anything in human history. And Wikipedia commissioned a study to find out what is motivating these people to be part of this. Why do they so desperately want to build something that they're not being paid for? And amazingly, their answers echoed ours from the virtual choir exactly. The first is connecting with others. Simply a chance to reach out, to find other people around them of a like mind and build a community. The second is a chance to share their talents and a chance to grow. So many people are desperate to share hidden talents or untapped talents that they have in their regular jobs, but in which they might be true experts. And in terms of a chance to grow, we saw this in the virtual choir. It wasn't always the best singers who were joining. In fact, sometimes it was the very worst singers, people who had never sung before, who had dreamed of singing all the time and were terrified. Many of you perhaps were told that you couldn't sing when you were a small child, and either told by a teacher or, God forbid, a parent saying, "You just, please don't sing, you stop." And you only have to hear this once. It's so damaging. Unlike the piano or the violin, the voice it is our soul. It's unique to each of us. It's our sound. And so for many people, joining the virtual choir was terrifying, and they grew exponentially just in the act of joining. I should say also that in virtual choir, every single person who uploads a video gets in. We haven't turned a single person away. If they're singing badly and they do something totally crazy, then we just bring them down in the mix a little bit, and then we bring them right back up. But everybody's in. And finally, to feel that they are part of something larger than themselves. This is exactly what I felt that first day that I was singing in choir, that suddenly I was part of something larger than myself. And this is exactly what these people are feeling, even in a virtual context. I find that truly extraordinary. We asked singers from within the virtual choir to upload their testimonials. What did they experience? What did they feel? And I chose my favorite. When I told my husband that I was going to be a part of this, he told me I did not have the voice for it. It hurt so much, and I shed some tears, but something inside of me wanted to do this despite his words. This is the first time I have ever sung in front of anyone. When I placed my marker on the Earth map, I had to go with the nearest city, which is 400 miles away, as I am in the Great Alaskan Satellite. Or as I'm in the Great Alaskan Bush, satellite is my only connection to the world. For millennium, you could always tell a society's most important foundations by the tallest structure in their village or their city, the Great Pyramids at Giza. That for hundreds of years here in Europe, it was always a church by decree that was the tallest building in the village or in the city. In the 20th century, now in the 21st century, of course, it's law buildings and banks. These are now the fundamental core of our ethos. But I would submit that rapidly that is changing. And the tallest building in our culture now is code. It's the internet. Vast, glittering cities, free of dogma, post-religious, post-national, a chance for individuals to come together and simply be part of something larger than themselves. When I'm creating, when I'm writing music, I try to do this very thing. I try to make music that hugs the audience, that invites them, seduces them, and brings them in so that everyone in the room, including the performers, are feeling the same thing at the same time, a real communal experience. And when I say it out loud like that, it sounds incredibly romantic. But the truth is, it's a bummer. The job is a bummer. I spend most of my day in a room alone, in my underwear, pulling at my hair and thinking if I would have studied harder, I could have been an architect. And for years and years, I worked the same way creatively. And I looked all over the internet for a video or for something that could demonstrate what my daily process creating music looks like. And I found this.
Hi-ho, Kermit the Frog here with the cultural part of the Sesame Street News, because today we're speaking to you from the home of that very famous songwriter, Mr. Don Music, who's writing a brand new hit song right now. Let's see how he's doing, shall we? Why not?
Mary had a little lamb, little lamb, little lamb. Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow. And everywhere that Mary went, Mary went, Mary went. And everywhere that Mary went, the lamb was sure to oh, I'll never get it. Oh, I'm sorry, Ludwig. Oh.
That's it right there. That's my daily life. And as I said, for years I worked this way, looking for that small moment, crushing my head. And it was finally my son, who is now 8 years old, but when he was 5, who showed me a better way. This is a painting that he made for me on a rainy day. I don't know if you can see it very, very clearly, but it's my name, Eric. And then around the sides here are these different objects. And so when he was finished with it, I asked him, I said, what are these pictures? What did you make for me? So he described to me, with no sense of irony, very simply, he said, well, the top one is a rainbow skull and crossbones. Then there's a giant pyramid of cheese. Then Zeus with rain and lightning bolts striking down a snake wearing pants. And then finally, an alien baby playing maracas and hot dogs. Now, any of you who have children know this is exactly the kind of acid trip thing they say all the time. I don't know where this stuff comes from. But what is amazing watching my son work like this and watching children work like this is there's no sense of right or wrong. There's no sense of judgment. There's no sense of mistake. What they're doing is they're drawing and they're learning as they learn. What can my hand do? What can I build? What can I make? It's free. It's even fun. And frankly, they're failing all the time. He's trying to draw this snake in pants. It doesn't look like a snake in pants. And he's even aware that it doesn't look like a snake in pants, but it doesn't matter. He'll get it better the next time. He's just learning and working while he fails. And I've started doing the very same thing. This is a style sheet for a piece that I wrote called Equus, which in Latin simply means horse. And what I did is I started, without really writing a note of music, you'll see a few notes on there, but they're just ideas that I had. I wasn't thinking at all, just, oh, that kind of sounds like a horse. Let me just put that down. No sense of judgment. And I wrote all kinds of words: spinning, powerful, clean. I drew this picture because I just had this idea of this spinning moto perpetuo that was going over and over and over. And amazingly, what this becomes, what this sheet becomes, this free, open, playful thing, becomes a document with my original intention, which somehow is going to find its way all the way through the creative process and end up in the finished piece. The other thing that I'm looking for, and not desperately like in the Muppets where he pounds his head, but I'm simply looking for what I call a golden brick, which for me is the fundamental musical idea. I found that when I write this way and I'm just playing, it'll start to find its way to the top, almost like the cream in milk. And pretty soon there's a moment when it coalesces, and boom, I know that's the idea. That small group of notes somehow encapsulates everything that I want the piece to be. Composers have been doing this kind of thing for years, looking for this small golden brick. One of the most famous in classical music is this motive. Dum, 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 dum. It's Bach. He just spelled out his name. H is German for be natural. I tried doing the same thing. This is a piece I wrote called Ghost Train. This is the opening flute solo. And you see the numbers underneath. This is my ex-girlfriend's phone number. Terrifying, actually. And what we're doing as composers is we want to take this golden brick, this idea that is pregnant with possibility. And when we've got it, then we want to build first the foundation, then the walls, then an entire cathedral out of that single motive so that it resonates top to bottom with one idea. Perhaps the most famous example of this in all of classical music is this motive. Dun, 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 dun. Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, 4 notes. Some historians believe that it was Beethoven describing fate knocking on the door. Bum, 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 bum. Some believe that it was actually his abusive father beating him as a child. Da, 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 da. We don't know for sure, but what we do know is that it is full of life and ideas and passion, and that he built a cathedral around it. Watch how the motive gets thrown around the orchestra. Now he develops that idea. See the basses? And with apologies to Beethoven, I will stop it here. If you don't own this, it's 99 cents on iTunes. It's the best money you'll ever spend. That is not to say that this was easy. Oftentimes, especially with a composer like Beethoven, it seems unachievable. Like, well, that's Beethoven. He can do this. Here's an example of Beethoven's manuscript. You can see the struggle, can you? It's a fist fight with the gods. Beethoven scratching and clawing, trying to find the meaning in all of this, trying to make sense of even that tiny motive. My manuscript looks similar to this, although sometimes when I find myself with writer's block, what I'll do is I'll take a favorite composer and I'll write out their music in my own hand, note for note, just to feel what it must feel like. This is my own hand, but writing out Bach. It looks so clean because Bach already wrote it, and I'm just copying it. But it's such a beautiful way to open it up and to free myself, and also to walk in another great composer's shoes, to see what it must have been like to be Bach, even if just for a moment. On the other side of this is Mozart. This is the first and only draft of the full score of a piano concerto that he wrote. Any of you who read music can see that it's perfect. You could actually play from this. So, which means that he did all of the work in his head and then just had to be bothered with writing it down. It's important to remember that this really only happens once in every 1,000 years, and that Mozart is a complete bastard for being able to do this. Now, the struggle, the one that I showed in Beethoven, what composers, and I think what all creators are looking for, is how to take that idea and give it structure, to give it form. And in music, that means how does it play out over time? How does it start here? How does it bring the audience in? How does it develop? And how does it end? And my God, that struggle can be Herculean, or at least feel Herculean. Oftentimes what composers will do, and other creators as well, is look to the natural world for structures that already work. Many of you may remember the Fibonacci sequence from math class. If you don't, it's pretty simple. It's just 1 + 1 = 2, 1 + 2 = 3, 2 + 3 = 5, 3 + 5 = 8, 5 + 8 = 13, so on and so on. And what you do is you take the last number in the sequence, whichever one you like, say in this case 55, and the penultimate number, the number right before it, 34, and the ratio between those two numbers is what we call phi, 1 to 1.618, or the golden ratio. That middle section is called the golden mean in English. And artists, when it's graphed, it looks this way. This shape probably looks familiar. You find it in a nautilus shell, in a plant, in a hurricane, in a galaxy. Architects have used this for centuries. Here's a beautiful staircase. I think it may even be French. The Parthenon. Perfect golden ratios here. Our friend the Mona Lisa. And finally, this is the opening piece of mine that we played, Lux Aurumque. And you'll see that in the sound file, the first half is 1.6 to 1 in terms of time. Again, a perfect Fibonacci sequence. Now, this kind of idea, this form, this structure, doesn't have to be limited only to music or to even art. Real companies are using this today as a way of communicating on a deep level with their customers. You all know Apple Computer. I had this very computer. It was my first one. Hello. This was my favorite of the Macs. Do you remember the 1998 Bondi Blue Mac that brought Apple back from the dead and announced Steve Jobs' ascension back to the ranks of genius? My favorite part about this Mac wasn't the translucent blue or how cool it looked. It was the handle on back, which it's an invitation. It's like, come on, pick me up. It's fun. It's just a computer. It's playful. Some of you might not remember, but in 1998, computers were not fun. They certainly weren't playful. Also, they were heavy as shit. And Apple is obsessed with the Fibonacci sequence and the golden mean. I don't know if you can see it here, but this is the iPhone filled with these perfect golden spirals so that it's balanced. Here's the new iCloud logo. The Apple logo itself, which is just a wonder, a marvel of use of the golden ratio. Now again, what's the point? The point, I believe, is this, that composers, architects, artists, and even industrial designers use this deep, deep language as a way to communicate to the audience. When I write a piece of music that uses the Fibonacci sequence, I don't think ever someone sits in the audience and gets to the end of the piece and says, wow, what a lovely use of the golden mean there. I really felt it in the middle. But what people do feel in that moment is it feels complete. It feels satisfying. You're speaking to the emotional part of their brain, the intuitive pattern-seeking part of their brain, instead of the intellectual part of their brain. And Apple does this so well, as do many artists throughout history. Apple has been roundly criticized endlessly. We were just talking before we came out, weren't we, about, we're waiting to see the iPhone 6, and better be good. And it's funny, this is a huge part of the creative process, is having to stand strong in the face of these critics, the endless barrage of critics. And for myself as a creator, I've found one immutable truth. Listen to your inner voice. For me, it's a very small voice, and very clear. If I'm going to go left, it'll say, no, go right. It usually only gives me one chance to go right, and then it says, all right, you do what you're going to do. But if I listen to that, no, yep, that's the right sound. That's the right sound. There's this very famous saying amongst composers for film, which is, why go with your fifth bad idea when you can go with your first bad idea? And I use this all the time, to trust my gut and to stand strong in the face of the critics. Like everywhere else, classical music has its share of critics. I keep these on my wall just to remind myself that much greater composers than I have weathered the storm as well. Tchaikovsky's First Symphony, like the first pancake, is a flop. Lovely. Elegance, purity, and measure are gradually surrendering to a new, frivolous, and pompous style adopted by the superficial talents of our time, the London Times. This is on the first public performance of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, the Ode to Joy, arguably the greatest piece of classical music ever written. A more modern one, the iPhone is nothing more than a luxury bauble that will appeal to a few gadget freaks. Apple is unlikely to make much of an impact on the market. Bloomberg, January 2007. Almost got it. And my favorite response ever to one of these critics is from composer Max Reger, who wrote back to the New York Times after a scathing review in 1920, "I'm sitting in the smallest room in my house. Your review is before me. It will soon be behind me." Critics are idiots. This is the thing. And what critics never realize or never acknowledge is that creators are learning. They're learning. They're making mistakes. And sometimes it's not the first piece that you write that's going to be right. Sometimes you have to write 4 bad pieces to get to the 5th bad piece. Sometimes you have to draw a bad snake in pants before it finally starts looking like a snake wearing pants. And my motto now, hung huge on my studio wall, is this: fail big and fail often. I have learned more in the past couple of years using this motto, hanging it all out there, just trying something and seeing if it works, challenging myself and not listening to the critics. I'd like to close today's presentation with just the last few minutes of our most recent virtual choir. This is from a musical that I wrote called Paradise Lost, which will be staged on the West End in London next year. It's called Fly to Paradise. You'll see the angel with wings. And yeah, 8,420 different singers from 101 countries.
And all she ever thinks about is memories of soaring through the sky. 'Cause she remembers having wings, but she's forgotten what it feels like to fly. And I want to
Thank you very, very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I know that the drinks are awaiting, so I'm happy to take any questions, but if you'd rather be drinking, I will totally understand. Anything at all. Yes, ma'am.
Do you pay your singers?
Do I pay my singers? I do not. But we make no profit whatsoever off of the, in fact, we make absolutely sure that it's a not-for-profit organization. Otherwise, we would pay them, certainly. Yes, sir.
Have you ever tried a live concert?
We have tried a live concert. So at the TED conference last year, We worked with Skype, and we had 32 singers from around the world coming in at the same time. It was a disaster. Yeah, the technology needs 5 more years, maybe. It's 5 years, maybe. Anything else? No? Thank you all very, very much. It was a great honor. Thank you.